Like a fat guy putting on shorts, you split your sides at Thursday Thoughts.
Welcome to this week's edition of Thursday Thoughts with Eddie Anchor. I'm your host, Eddie Anchor. We've come back to that horrible time of the year again where we roll into a split round. Half the teams will play this week, the other half next week. Good news for old Eddie though. It means that I'll get a week off as well. Now, tonight's episode we'll have to tide you over for 2 weeks because I'm taking a week off. Alright, we had a couple of cracking games last weekend with the commish making it 4 wins in a row. And one more, one of the more incredible finishes of the game. With only minutes left in the weekend, he needed a miracle. It came in the form of 2 goals in the final 2 minutes. One to Nate Fife and the other to bad boy Toby Green as he descended from the clouds to snatch victory. It was a brilliant victory. Another huge performance over the weekend was that of the 2 cellar dwellers in Robbo and Ben. It seems that every time one of these guys wins, so does the other. So for all of Ben's hard work of running over the top of second placed Hayden, he made a net game of 0 on avoiding the spoon. Robbo's win wasn't so meritorious as he only beat Callum. And let's face it, who hasn't? Now, enough about last week, let's look at what matters. The week ahead. First up, Bunga versus Hayden. We all knew it had happened eventually, but the question was when. When would living in Japan finally catch up with Hayden when he's trying to make team changes? The answer is the weekend just gone. It was almost the worst possible time as Matt was in serious trouble and looked every chance of dropping a game. Failing to set his lineup, Hayden only fielded half a team, and subsequently Ben was still only able to beat him by 20 points, but he beat him nonetheless. This week he will need to get his game face on to tackle the rampaging Bung. He is currently on the greatest winning streak of his club's history, 2, having managed to string together back-to-back victories for the first time in his team's history. So starved for success is Bung's team that they actually had an open-top bus hired and driven down Peachy Road midweek as his team finally managed to win 2 games in a row. After last week's schmozzle, I can't imagine Hayden allowing it happen again. Hayden by 130. Andy versus Tom. These two must be feeling a little like Drew Petrie at the moment. They were so close to the top only a few weeks ago and have completely choked. It's getting so bad for Tom that he's now lost 5 in a row after sitting a game clear on top of the ladder only a few weeks ago. The league has never seen anything like it. Old DraftBot is looking more and more like an old Casio calculator at the moment after a horrible loss to the 9th place commish. I guess no matter how powerful your DraftBot is, awesome isn't something that can be measured. And that's just what the commish produced last week to make Andy his bitch once more. Still sitting in 3rd with an excellent percentage, Andy is still somewhat of a chance of pinching 2nd spot from Hayden, but that will need to start this week. Getting over Tom will have to be the first thing he does. That will be made a little bit easier with 2nd round pick Andrew Walker being put in for surgery midweek for Tom's team. I'd like to harp on that point. How the fuck was Andrew Walker a 2nd round draft pick in any team? Anyway, much like Sean Hampson, Tom's season has had a cold bucket of reality dumped on it and now he's truly living up to form. I expect Andy to seal up 3rd spot this week. I say that because I don't expect anyone directly below him to win another game for the year. Andy by 91 points. Chris versus Ben. After a huge mid-season run up the table, it has all come to an incredible halt. No, not Hulk. Halt. With a few recent wins to both Ben and Robbo, there is now only 1 game between Chris and the Spoon, and a loss to Ben this week, and he will be a real chance of making a late dash for it. Ben will be buoyed by his epic victory over title pretender Haydos last week, but the victory came at a cost, with key big man Aaron Sandline set to miss this week. Rumour has it that he's still suffering from a concussion after cracking his head on the doorframe of the change rooms. The downside for Ben's team this week is he is actually back in the country, which is likely to make things harder for his team to win. Team management attempted to extend his holiday until the end of the season, just to keep him away from the team. But, due to naval regulations, Ben was only safe to be on the ship for no longer than 10 days. Due to the rapid rate at which his weight was increasing while he was away, scientists calculated that 3 more days on the ship and he would have weighed the entire thing down to Atlantis. I suspect that Chris will have been throwing magnets at the whiteboard all week, trying to come up with the best possible lineup for one last crack of staying off the bottom. I think Ben's ridden his luck for the year now. Chris by 11 points. Alright, now we move on to Callum versus the Commish. For weeks we've been making wise cracks at Robbo's expense about how he's playing hymns like playing the buyer. But last week he showed that Callum's team is so poor that he can lose to anybody. After a few solid wins in a row, he's crashed back down to earth in a violent way with an absolute hiding to a man who's dominated him in everything for years. While Callum failed in his attempt to win 5 in a row last week, it is now the Commish's turn to try and pile in 5 straight. After a disastrous start to the season that saw him lose 9 of his first 12, he has somehow managed to string together 4 in a row with no end in sight to this brilliant run of form. I guess with the quality of the man, we knew it was only a matter of time. While the season may be gone, he's setting his team smaller, achievable goals from week to week. While he still considers the absolute embarrassment of Bunga's team as one of the greatest moments of the year, he has stated his team is still harbouring top 4 ambitions. While every game will need to be won from this point, recent form suggests it's still a possibility. The most pressing challenge to this goal will be Callum's team this week, who, only 1 game ahead of the Commish, also has similar aspirations of the top 4 finish. With a loss to Robbo harsh enough to shake any team to its core, I think Callum will find it tough to pull things back together this week. The Commish by 93 points. Alright, now it's time to move on to the big heavy hitters. We move on to Matt versus Steve. All hail the incoming Thunderdome League champion, Matt. The way the rest of the year shapes up, there is no way he can lose the league from here. 2 games and percentage clear from second place Hayden, who is a spud anyway, there is very little chance anyone can catch him. It now becomes a race for second place. This finally creates an opportunity that hasn't existed since round 10. A team from the bottom 6 this week can actually finally jump into the top 6 with a victory. Steve is only 1 game and a small amount of percentage away of going straight past Tricky Mickey. He will be coming out with all guns blazing this week in an attempt to climb the impossible mountain, Mount Flushmore. Despite managing to get the W last week, he was only playing Chris, so it was a very low-scoring affair with very little genuine quality on show. With a handful of players likely to miss for Matt, this could be Steve's best chance to slay the beast. I can't see it happening, and I think Matt will be keeping a roll on to his title, flattening Steve on his way through. Matt by 212 points. Tricky versus Robbo. Come on, nobody told me this was gentlemen's round. When these 2 coaches battle it out this week, it'll be all handshakes and back slaps as 2 of the really good eggs of the comp try to win the nicest possible way. Their good nature and elite sportsmanship is possibly what's leading to such mediocre performances on field at the moment. They don't want to hurt anyone. It's gotten to the point that Robbo has actually had to hire an intern to filter all his posts and comments while he's paro, just to ensure he doesn't say anything that may be deemed offensive. Tricky tried the same thing to monitor all the posts to ensure he doesn't say anything offensive while he's paro, but since he drinks so often, he's had to take it to the next level and actually hire an offshore 24-hour team working round the clock. There is absolutely no form line you can follow to give a logical reason for either of these 2 teams winning. Robbo could come out and win or lose by 400 depending on how much golden ale he sinks with Neon Leon the night before. Midweek, Tricky was happy to award Alan Christensen the award for the 100th injury. 100 injuries in 40 games. Not a bad effort for Tricky. I've seen nursing homes with a better mortality rate than Tricky's team. Nonetheless, I think he can finally manage to turn his form around and nail Robbo back to the bottom of the ladder with a 17-point victory. Now, speaking of the ladder, let's take a look at how the ladder is shaping up with 5 games to go. Matt is leading the way clearly on top as he has been. He's been leading it basically since Tom had his stroke. Well, we can only assume that Tom's had a stroke. His arms are all droopy, His face looks all one-sided, and his team's lost 5 games in a row, so his brain's clearly not at full function. Or perhaps it is. Hayden has become somewhat irrelevant this year, just filling the space between Matt and the rest. After last week's performance, we're not even sure he hasn't been mistaken by some Japanese girls for pop star Mika and is currently being held hostage somewhere by them. Below him is just a mixture of hopeless hopefuls who have had draft picks but not the talent to challenge this year. And all the way down the bottom, we have the remnants of what were once great coaches just waiting out this year until a more even draft format will allow genuine talent to rise to the top rather than just basically who was shit from the last year being up the top. It's a sad sight to see the league champion from last year languishing down the bottom. While it's proof the commish set up a brilliant equalisation policy, things needed to change, because if the likes of Matt, Bunga and Tom had to put up with poor draft picks next year, there would be 3 teams with 2 wins between them. Alright, now, we've actually managed to get superstar North Melbourne forward Drew Petrie to give us a bit of an insight last week into what just happened with Brian Lake. Let's check it out. G'day all, Drew Petrie here from the North Melbourne Football Club. Eddie contacted me midweek to see if I could give a bit of an explanation about what happened the other week with Brian Lake and I. Sorry guys. Sorry about that. I have my shirt a little tight there. Anyway, as I was saying, the other week when Lakey and I were having a bit of a roll around, he managed to get me on the back. Oh, sorry, still need a bit of a clear up. Oh, shit. Bloody hell. Oh, went down the wrong hole. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, as I tried to plead to the tribunal, Brian was just having a bit of a roll around. There's no way he would ever try and... Alright, not sure what happened there. It's almost as if he's trying to... Someone stop him. He's a lunatic. Jeebus. That's one of Drew's worst performances in the media that I've seen for a while. It's almost as if he choked. Anyway, we have an international correspondent in the show this week. We are crossing live to France to get the Tour de France wrap up in 60 seconds with Michael van der Cycle. Thank you for joining me. My name is Michael van der Cycle, and this is a quick wrap from the Tour thus far. At the start, there was many riders competing for the first stage. The most exciting rider was Michael Cavendish, but he crashed and he's out. But didn't matter. Once he was out, Chris Froome was the man everybody had their eyes on. But then he crashed and he's out. But that's okay, because that left Alberto Contador to win the Tour. But he crashed and he's out. That didn't matter though. Even from there, at least there was still Andrew Talansky from the American team that they could tune in and watch. But then he crashed and he's out. There's about 4 riders left in the Tour that will contest tonight's stage in the Alps. It'll be a finishing with an Urs category climb at the top of Mont des Champs-Élysées. Hopefully there will be no more crashes, otherwise the only people making it all the way to Paris will be me and 10,000 stinky French people in caravans. Currently Vincenzo Nibali is leading the Tour, and there have only been 30 riders crashed out already. It's almost as if they've based this year's Tour on Tricky's team. Now, that's it for me. I'll see you on the Champs-Élysées. Thank you very much for that, Michael. It's always good to catch up on a different sport. Now, we move on to Free Agent of the Week. For everyone in the market for a defender, have I got a player for you? Cam O'Shea from Port Power has spent most of the season out of the Port lineup, but with a few recent injuries to some of the key backmen, this rangy, roaming backman is back in favour and starting to pick up points like he did last year. With only Melbourne to be concerned with as an opposition this week, I can see him roaming far and wide, and this man... far and wide off his man and intercepting plenty of haphazard forward 50 entries by the Ds. It's not often that we get a decent defender in the free agents pool, so I suspect this one won't last very long and he'll be a great pickup for somebody. Now, the final segment, Eddie Anker's Weekly Wanker. This week's wanker wasn't overly tough to pick out. It doesn't need to be a long, drawn-out explanation of how this week's wanker came about. It only needs to be short and sweet. So we set the scene back a few years, 1996 to be precise. Preliminary final, Swans versus Bombers. The seconds are ticking by, the scores are tied. The winner goes through to the grand final. Lock it! The siren's gone with the ball in hand, outside 50. He goes back, he kicks the point that sends the Swans into their first grand final. Now, imagine if during grand final week, old Rocket Eads' side was up alongside Plugger and says, "Listen, champ, good work winning the game for us last week, but we're moving on. You're out." Flash forward to 2014. The season on the line. His team is down, needing 100 points in the final quarter for victory. Brendan Goddard steps up and scores 60 of them on his own. This week's wanker taps BJ on the shoulder and says, "Cheers for dominating for me and winning the game on your own on the weekend. That will likely save my season, but I'm shipping you out for two of the worst players going around this year. Dane Swan and Heritier Lumumba." What the fuck? Seriously, it's amazing to think, and complete blight on the entire league, that this bloke sitting on top of the comp can be making such stupid trades. Stevie Wonder called in a few weeks ago just to let us know that Dane Swan was carrying an injury. What a surprise! Now he's out for a month. Good trade. Fucking awesome. If this week's wanker goes on to win the league this year, he will go down as the worst winner of the Thunderdome League in history. It's a dark day for the league, folks. This week's wanker is Matt, for being such a tight ass with all of his other trades and then making the most ridiculous trade in history. He's a moron. Like, Bunga wouldn't have even approved of that one. Anyway, thanks for tuning in this week. There will be no episode next week as it's a split round. Stay safe and enjoy your weekend. Good night.